Hello, everybody. My name is Will Sobel, and this panel is Growing Your RPG Brand. We're going to talk for the next hour about some awesome things in RPGs and brand that kind of overlaps with design and marketing and, lots of operational things, but a lot of cool creative things too. On this panel, I'm going to introduce myself, and then I'm going to let our lovely panelists introduce themselves. Like I said, my name is Will Sobel. I'm the Director of Sales, Marketing, and Licensing at Green Ronin. In my off time, I write and design and develop board games and RPGs. And then I'm just going to introduce some of our panelists as they appear on my little box. So first, Cat, do you want to tell us a little bit about you?
Cat, I think you're muted.
Cat is
Right,
definitely...
okay, it should be unmuted. Yes, it took longer to unmute than I had expected. My name is Cat Tobin, and I'm the co-owner and managing director of Pelgrane Press. That's us. So obviously we've, as a company, we've worked on building our brand in a lot of new spaces and try to reach. So this is something that's really kind of pertinent to what we're doing at the moment.
Cool. And Christopher, do you want to tell us, introduce yourselves?
Myself? I'm just want to meet. So I'm good. Yeah. Hi. Well, in my day job, I'm Professor Christopher McGlothlin, and in my secret identity, I run my own tiny little imprint, which I'm hoping to grow. So I'm here to contribute and take notes, called Go Show Press. And I did this after strictly freelancing for, oh Lord, 22 years. Sorry, I'm at the stage of my life I can't believe I've been doing anything for 22 years. But yes, but there you go. But now flying solo, doing my own thing with Ghost Show Press.
Excellent. And JR?
Hi, I'm Jara Blackwell. I'm the author of Shelter in Place and one of the hosts of D&D Dads, which is an advice show where two dads give you advice about role-playing games, and I'm one of the dads. And in my day job, I'm a social media manager. So I know a lot about branding and showing up online.
Cool. And Maz, you want to round us out?
Sure. Hi, I'm Maz Hamilton. I am 1/3 of Rowan, Rook, and Deckard, with the other 2/3 being Grant Howitt and Chris Taylor. We've only existed for a little over 3 years now. We're working out of the UK, and we make Heart, Spire, Unbound, Goblin Quest, and Honey Heist. So there's quite the range when it comes to thinking about different types of games. And yeah. Here to talk about how that works.
So we've got quite the range of folks on this panel. So we're going to tackle what this is from a few different angles. Now, when I first got the email about this panel, the first question that I kind of asked myself was, who are the people that are going to be on the other end of this panel? Right, and obviously there are going to be a lot of people like us who are designers or writers or publishers who have a brand or are making a brand, or rather they have a game or they're making a game. So I think that my first question, the first thing that I think is important to this conversation is defining a brand and how that intersects with role-playing games. I think, Kat, you were kind of leading a conversation there with that you're growing, right? You've already got a thing and you're growing it, and I found that kind of as a compelling starting point.
Yeah, so I think that so for a bit of background, Pelgrane Press was founded or co-founded by my business partner Simon Rogers and Sasha Bolton back in around 2000, and for a very, very long time it I mean, essentially the only kind of branding really was that we published games that Simon really liked, which, you know, Simon has exceptional taste, to be fair to him. So yeah, so he's, you know, but that was the direction that the company took, and there was no kind of thought given at any point to who we were as a company, what we were doing, why we were doing it, and whether we would continue doing that or where we wanted to be going in the future. And those are all, I think, like when I kind of came in as managing director, those were all questions that were really important to me because I am not Simon. So I had no, you know, it was important for me to define what the Pelgrane Press brand actually meant. What kind of games did we make, right, when they were divorced from games Simon liked to play, right? And that's been a real kind of progress of discovery, I think, or a journey of discovery for us as a company, because again, working with the whole team to kind of make sure that what I think is the Pelgrane brand, what I think are the things that we focus on, are things that the rest of the team also value, because I'm the last one in as well. Like, so I'm the newest kind of member of the Pelgrane team. So it's like I'm entirely fresh with kind of a lot less history and legacy thought than the others. So yeah, so those have been the key things that I've been trying to identify first of all, and I think it's like your 101 is what is my brand? Who am I as a designer or as a company, or what is this game that I have written? Like, who am I that's doing it? What is this game doing? What is this company doing? And who is it for? Right? Who's my target audience? And kind of identifying those kind of three elements are, you know, I feel like they're really key to building and developing your brand.
Right. I super agree with all of that. The brand is kind of the intersection of all these ideas about what does my product want to be, what does my company want to be, and what do the people within that company, the people playing that game, what are they? So you've got these three elements, and where they intersect is the brand, right? Like you were saying. And I think that that's super interesting. And Maz, I think Grant has a brand, right? Part of your company, right? Like
100%.
the fact that Honey Heist and what is the other one that's really really famous? The
He's
one
written
page.
40 of them, so
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so many. And I think that that's kind of self-explanatory that for him, that is a brand. So do you have thoughts on how that, to kind of lead off of what Kat was saying, of how Grant, who is a known entity in his brand, intersects with your company as a whole?
yeah, I would kind of describe it as being a bit like having two separate brands. I think, you know, the 3 points that Kat mentioned, I think, are really critical. But I would add another, which is how you do what you do.
Oh, sure.
And brand Grant is scrappy, it's humorous, it's light, it's often it creates these quite self-contained, quite small, and often quite daft experiences at the table. Not all of his one-page games work that way, and some of the ones that I really enjoy playing are the very serious ones. But there is a kind of lo-fi aesthetic, which is not quite zany, but sort of, that you can kind of see going through pretty much everything that Grant has put out as a one-pager. And that is the complete opposite of what we do at Rowan, Rook and Deckard. We do big, hefty products. We do very high production values. We do something that is a lot of the tone is still there, I think, because Grant is the writer across the vast majority of our products, either one of the lead writers or at minimum a contributor. And there is a kind of lightness and a humorousness of tone and a set of design principles that sit underneath an awful lot of the games that we create, which is common to the both kind of brand Grant games and the Rowan, Rook and Deckard games. But in terms of the likely customers who are going to come into contact with them and the people who might be playing them, we see it as a Venn diagram rather than a kind of single audience. And we see the things that those people want. There's an overlap, but they're not necessarily going to be 100% the same.
Yeah.
So Yeah, it's almost two separate. It's two separate but linked things.
Do you want to talk about what you have done to create that separation, or what creates? I'm trying to think of like that. There's probably synergy, right? That you guys have created, but also things that you have done to make sure that they're separate, or is that just something that you let Grant do naturally?
A lot of it is natural and organic, but some of it is like almost being clear that when Grant started his one pages was actually before Rowan Rook and Deckard as a company really existed.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a distinction between we want to make these big finished things that will speak to a more traditional RPG audience, and Grant wanting to kind of get his ideas out into the world and experiment and play and create these what I think we would now call it micro games, but at the time, 5 years ago, that wasn't really in existence yet. Itch had only really just started to be a thing. Patreon was only just starting to really kind of kick off, and so there was this experimental nature to that where Grant kind of worked through his design ideas and found his feet there, and the brand and the games that he was creating kind of grew alongside each other. I think Rowan Rook and Deckard was a much more deliberate thing. So, for example, we sat down and created a logo. We did not think about a sensible name because you can't spell Rowan Rook and Deckard. And if I could go back in time, I might tweak that slightly.
Sure.
But we thought about like wanting to have a web presence, thinking about it as a continuous sort of publishing brand rather than I'm going to make some stuff and see what happens. So there was always this much more deliberate thing. And we sat down at the beginning of Rowan Rook and Deckard and said, what is our mission? What is our vision? And what are our values? What are the things that we want to be known for? And there's been much more design and much more of a deliberate thing has gone into the creation of the company than the sort of one pages and the associated kind of things like our podcast, which are much more on the lighter side and much more experimental and much more scrappy.
Yeah.
It's almost like having an innovation shop attached to your main product, if you think about it in terms of some other industries.
So I think that's super interesting that you have a podcast. That's something that I've seen a lot of companies do nowadays. And a lot of the time it is pitched as like, keep up with all of our products, right? And but the reality is that it's a way to engage with your audience. And audience's engagement is like a really important part of growing your brand, because your brand is more of a concept than a product. And like we were talking about earlier, it is the intersection of these things, like what kinds of products do I want to publish and what kind of company do we want to be. And I think that podcast, and I'm going to tie this into social media as well and kind of toss the ball to JR, because that sounds like your realm of things to talk about here, right? Is these kinds of ways outside of just what kind of products do I want and what does my game experience ultimately look like, to talk about, outside of my product, what does growing my brand look like?
I think that's a good question to bring up, and thinking about audiences in particular and who you're marketing to and who you want to engage with. And one thing I'd like to note for anyone who's listening to this panel is that what might work for other people, even like people on this panel or say famous people you see who are doing really well, might not work for you. And that's okay. Like, it's okay to try what they're doing. And if it doesn't work for you, that's fine. You can change to something else. It might not appeal to your audience. An example I have is outside the role-playing world, but in my day job, I work for this environmental nonprofit, and we brought in consultants to tell us, what's the best way to like get people to fall in love with us. And they all told us people like to look at people. People engage and connect to people. People want to see people outdoors. But whenever I put pictures of people outdoors, it was crickets, total silence. And it turned out our audience of nature lovers and hikers, they didn't want to see people outdoors. they see people all the time. They wanted to engage with nature. They wanted to go to a place where they wouldn't see any people at all. They wanted to be alone in the woods, please and thank you. And knowing that another person was there, huge turnoff. And so I think one of the things that folks might want to think about is that when you hear specific advice like that is like, oh, you need to put up, maybe like a playtest video or a podcast or something that's like, think about like what you're good at and what appeals to you and what appeals to the people, to the audience that you're trying to reach. And that's the kind of materials you want to make. Maybe that's a podcast. Maybe that's an actual play video. Maybe your audience doesn't watch those. So don't put time into making them. And I'd say, so think about what they want, where they are, and then meet them where they are. It's fine to stand on a hill and say, rah, 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 my stuff. But it's even better to go like down into the village and say, oh, I see here you all are playing games. Here is mine. It's just much easier that way.
Yeah, I think it is important to note that all of this advice or experience that we talk about here is what has worked or is working for these people in this panel right now. And I think that the right now is also super important here because surprise, markets evolve and change. And that means that your fan base is going to evolve and change, and that means that the way that they engage is going to change also. And let's talk about the elephant in the room as far as engagement changing goes with Dungeons and Dragons, right? Like none of us are as big as D&D, and none of us will ever be as big as D&D. But the reality is that D&D did something really smart with 5th edition, changing the way that they engage with people and evolving again with supporting things like Critical Role. Like actual plays have become such a huge part of RPGs as an industry, and throwing support behind actual plays that are engaging your fan base has helped Dungeons and Dragons expand so much this edition. But let's circle back for social media stuff, JR. What kinds of, so you were talking about one of the things that I was hoping that you would expand on here is talking about the different sorts of things that that customers engage with social media, and to kind of jumpstart the conversation, I'd like to tell a little story about something that I did with a bunch of other social media managers in tabletop role-playing games like 2 years ago. We actually have a like community managers private Facebook group for tabletop role-playing games that we poke jokes at each other with on like Twitter and stuff like that. And all of our fans really enjoy seeing the like Green Ronin Twitter account make fun of the R. Talsorian Twitter account and stuff like that. But a couple of years ago, we designed this like really elaborate Saturday where we just said the names of each other's games with puns attached to them, and that Twitter thread exploded. Like we were just doing it as like this cute, funny thing, but like the last time I looked at it was like almost 11 times more than our normal engagement level in that thread, which is something easy and quick that we put together, and it was just a bunch of other tabletop folks having fun with each other.
I think you got to play to the native habitat of whatever social media you're in. So Twitter is about conversation, right? It's about engaging with each other, and whether that you're at a cocktail party on Twitter, Instagram is it's about the images, and in many cases like curated images, and then you get into stories, which are about non-curated stuff. And Facebook, which is better for longer form text than, say, a place like Instagram. So you're thinking about like what's the habitat of my content, and where is my content going to play best, and where can I play best? And in a lot of ways, like, what am I good at? A lot of people tell me, like, I feel like there's too much social media and I don't know how to like do all of it. And this is just me giving you permission to not. You don't have to do all of it. It's great to reserve your name sometimes places, but you don't have to do all of it. You know, you can do what you're good at and really like lean into that place.
Yeah. So again, it's about the intersection of that habitat plus what does my company want to look like. Yeah. Cool. I'm going to throw the ball to Christopher because I was kind of hoping he would have some insights on like what exactly you're talking about. That Ghost Show is this new this new entity, right? That you are doing now on your own.
Yes.
So using the 22 years of experience that you have freelancing and the nature of growing a brand, you, it seems, are in the kind of unique position that maybe the rest of us are not in, where we are growing brands that have been growing for years and years, and you are kind of like trying to launch, you know, maybe not now, but recently. What kind of things? Because building that foundation, that first kind of push, is a lot more important than, or a lot more not important, but powerful than the work that the rest of us are doing, because obviously having a good foundation and a good first step is key. So what are the things that you're doing right now? What are the things that you plan to be doing for maybe the next the first year or so while you're building this?
Well, I really appreciate what was just said about knowing your strengths and building on them. And in my case, I do have 22 years of freelancing to fall back on. In fact, when I decided to launch Go Show, and honestly, Go Show was an accident. I wound up having a manuscript that I had was just laying around, and I'm like, wow, what can I, you know, I put so much work into this. What can I do with this? And well, now we have shirts. So yeah, it's snowballing. Yeah. And the wonderful surprise about it was finding out that after 22 years, I was kind of a brand. I'm way too introverted to say that without the doubt creeping in.
Own it.
Yeah, I have to. I have to. I have to. My business partner talked me into kickstarting this, and I said, "How are we going to talk people into buying this?" And he goes, "We'll tell them you wrote it." I'm like, "And?" And Lord knows we funded, and I found out that there were people out there who were willing to buy stuff just because my name was on it. Apparently, I built up a bunch of goodwill there in 22 years. And I guess maybe that was one of the more larger lessons that I learned is RPGs are bigger than they ever have been, except for arguably in the 80s, but they're certainly bigger than they've been in wow, 35 years. But it's still a very, 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 very small hobby. Still a very, very, very relatively small creative world, and it's amazing how it doesn't take that many positive relationships, positive notices before all of a sudden you're a big deal in this small world. And if we're all comfortable with the fact that we'll probably never replace D&D, you can have a nice career. You can have a nice brand, and the smallness I think is an advantage. You know, if you're doing good work, if you're a good human being, if you know how to utilize your own strengths. Like I'm more of a Facebook guy, not just because I'm starting. I'm well gray that I'm too much of a crier for Twitter. I learned that pretty well on, but yeah, I the Facebook thing has worked for me. I'm a writer. I'm not much of a visual guy, and well, if, right here you go. I'm not much of a visual. Yeah, you can tell why I'm not really real visual. But yeah, but yeah, I'm a writer, or I like to tell people I'm a good word guy. So yeah, Facebook. It's been able to use what my pluses to reach out to an audience that surprisingly is there, just on the strength of the fact that, for 22 years I hit my deadlines. I did my best. Was very, very blessed to work with some amazing people, and that infrastructure was kind of waiting for me there. And now that I'm doing my own projects, I have this tremendous well of support I didn't even realize was out there. So you can't underestimate the value of a personal relationship in an industry which honestly is still relatively very small.
Yeah. So I'm gonna take two of the things that you said, and I'm gonna rope Maz into one of them. Um, so the first one that I have, I'm gonna just kind of briefly touch on in that you hit your deadlines.
Yes.
Right. Uh, let's talk about that for a second, because you also mentioned Kickstarter, and I feel like the two of those things just are really important operational or logistical things
Mhm.
about growing your brand. Every brand, every brand. Um, I'm going to break my own a rule of saying that all of this advice is subjective to different people. Um, I'm going to be a little arrogant and say this one is important to everybody. Hit your deadlines. And if you're not going to hit your deadlines, communicate to the important people that you're not going to hit your deadlines. And that's just not talking about your artists or your freelancers. I'm talking about your customers, because if you tell people, hey, we said that we were going to launch this in December. It is totally okay that you don't hit December as long as you effectively communicate that to all of those people.
Mhm.
We talk about how rough sometimes Kickstarter comments are, and that's totally valid and totally real. But a good portion of your customers are going to understand, especially in 2020, that if you cannot hit your deadline, that's okay. Like, thank you for communicating, and form a coherent uh, explanation of, hey, we thought that we were gonna hit this printer and the printer is backed up, or hey, one of our artists fell behind. Those are all, like, they don't need to know the details, as long as you effectively communicate, hey, this deadline is not going to get hit. But not communicating that and then continuing to not hit the deadline hurts your brand, because it will say, oh my gosh, I can't believe that so and so is so late on this thing that they told us we were going to get. I'm never going to buy a thing from them again. And then even if you got the golden project and released a 1,000-page amazing 5-star core rulebook for a license that everyone loves, and you're only selling it for $10, you've already bought bad will.
Yeah,
Um,
it really is a double-edged sword. You can build a good reputation in this industry in a surprisingly short amount of time, and you can torch it in a surprisingly, if you're a jerk to people, if you're ripping off customers, if you're missing deadlines, your name will be mud faster than you knew possible.
mhm. So the
Like,
second thing, oh, I'm sorry, Maz, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, we're talking about trust.
Right.
Trust is if you're relatively unknown, most people in the RPG community are pretty welcoming and pretty okay with giving people a chance.
Correct.
But trust is really easy to burn, really easy to lose, and really difficult to regain. It is much easier to start like okay and get more trusted over time than it is to recover from the kind of dip that happens if you fail to deliver something that you've promised.
Mhm.
Yeah.
A good rule of thumb that I use there is under promise and over deliver. Right, when I'm setting expectations, whether it's for how big a book is, or the price of a book, or the date that it's going to launch, under promise and over deliver. If something happens to come out early, great. Not a single person is going to complain about something coming early.
Kat,
But
oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
Kat, I really like what you said about trust. And I think that's so important. Trust is, in a lot of ways, a brand is about trust too. It's about telling someone reliably who you are and that you can trust that the kind of content I'm going to produce or who I am fits in maybe this brand circle. And that brand circle can be pretty big. But it tells people this is the kind of thing I make. And you can trust that when you buy something from me, it's going to be like this, whether that's like scrappy or really polished or short or easy to get into or super complex, whatever it is, it's like you can trust that this is me and this is what I do.
Yeah.
I really love that point about trust.
Yeah, 100%. That was a good point, Maz. So the second thing that Christopher mentioned that I want to rope Maz into is he was talking about shirts, and Maz was talking about designing a logo, right? And so a lot of people who are getting into the area that we're talking about now, I think, are designers, game designers, who specifically want to publish their own thing, right? And because they're game designers, they might just be thinking about mechanics, or maybe even art, but they're not thinking about the operational things that are super easy to do, like making a logo or making shirts, or those things that maybe the people on this panel find as very like 101 things, or 102 things, that everyone else might overlook or think, I don't need to do that yet. And I don't think that that's true. And I think that Maz's point about making a logo kind of sparked this idea for me at first, because when you're making a company, when you're starting a brand, that logo is super important, right? It helps to fall back on this trust thing. It effectively communicates to other people what to expect from my company or my game or whatever else. And I think that Maz, do you have thoughts about like what went into logo design for your brand specifically?
So our company is built around the three of us. The names Rowan, Rook, and Deckard are all character names that we've used previously.
Excellent.
And the logo is, we kind of had 2 or 3 different sort of elements around the logo, but we wanted something that encompassed a Rowan tree, a Rook, and then a book for Deckard, because the character of Deckard had a library which he was very proud of. I think that's the history there.
Mhm.
And we made the decision that we wanted it to be something that would look good, that would be recognizable, that could be kind of line worked, that could be put on the spines of books in particular, so that as you're looking down your shelf, if we ever got to the stage, which we're still not at yet really, of publishing other people's games, that you would be able to kind of see that and there would be continuity there. But the other big thing was that it was the first thing we paid money for as a business. It was the first thing that we sat down and, with the exception of web hosting, and that was Reddit's fault, which I can explain later if you want. We sat down and went, okay, we're doing this and we're going to treat it seriously. This is a thing where we've got ambition, we've got we've got some stuff we want to achieve here. We need to start to think of this as an umbrella where this isn't just about one game, it's not just about one project or one product or any one of us. It's about building something which is collective, and that thing needs an identity. So I think I'd see the logo as part of a conversation about the identity that the entity has, which is distinct from the three of us. We've talked about brand grant, which is not the same as like the person grant, just to be super clear. There was a real recognition early on that we wanted something that would be bigger than any one of us and potentially bigger than the three of us. And you have to create an identity for that thing that is separate from the individuals within it, because if you try to embody your brand, if you try to be the only, if you try and make them the same thing, oh boy, there's some mental illness there. Oh dear,
Mhm.
don't want to do that. There needs to be separation. And like anyone who's got more than a certain number of followers or fans on any social media platform will get this in some form. Who you are on social media is not who you are. And if you are a creator who's just starting out, who's like, oh, I embody the brand that is my games, I would caution you to be aware that that is a decision that you're making, and that you can change that decision if you want to. If you bind yourself up in your brand reception, then every negative comment, every 2-star review on drive-through will hit you as a person rather than
Right.
hitting the brand. So some
That
of it was about saying like these things are separate.
right.
And this is what we want this to be, and it's magical and it's mystical and it's a bit weird and it's kind of a glyph. But that's the thing that we're trying to build, not who we are.
So, in the logo discussion, another thing that an experience that I had recently that's that's kind of piggybacks on that is we at Green Ronin made a 20th anniversary logo to use this year, right? And it was the first time that the logo had been changed in, I don't know, like 10 years or something like that. And we wanted to communicate to people first and foremost that, hey, we have evolved as a company, right? Like the brand that we had years ago when we were doing True 20 stuff and third edition supplements is very different than what we're doing now. And we knew that, like we had seen the change, but like when we talked to a lot of people who were True 20 fans, they didn't realize that we had evolved and we had new games and we were making 5th edition supplements. And so the idea behind that was, yes, we're going to celebrate our 20th anniversary, but also our brand had changed and evolved. And so changing our logo to kind of show that as a communication piece to the rest of the world of, hey, we are changing and the world is changing. So here's a new logo. Here's the new us kind of thing. And we wanted it to pay homage to the original logo so that, it still looks, what was the word you used, Maz, about seeing your logo on the shelves? So
Consistent.
consistency.
Yeah, consistent and coherent. I think those are the two things that I try and pick out when we're looking at multiple books and how they kind of sit together on a shelf.
Right. And so we wanted to pay homage so that people knew that it was us and so that there was that consistency, but also to say, hey, this is something new, right? Okay, cool. And I can't help but notice that in the conversation about logos and shirts, Cat is wearing a Pelgrane Press shirt. Cat, do you want to talk about the like? I know that we have a lot of different shirts with the Green Ronin logo that people can buy in our store, and it seems like the same is true there. Do you want to talk about putting like what is putting shirts up in a store mean? How does that relate to your brand?
Yeah, so it's interesting. We kind of similarly to Green Running, we did a bit of a logo redesign as well, and we used to have this. I loved it. It was this really scrappy like image of an actual Pelgrane, and that's again like touching on what Maz was saying about Rowan, Rick, and Deckard. I'm constantly on the phone to people saying it's Pelgrane, and people are like, "It's what?" I'm like having to spell it out. So watching your company name. And also your logo as well, in terms of the design, like, when we were originally doing it, we did something like this.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of it was that it was 2 Ps back to back for Pelgrane Press. But it has been compared to lots of different forms of genitalia over the years. So, yeah, but, we didn't give up. So when we redesigned it, we kind of kept that double P aspect, and it does still have some. You can see it. You can't unsee it once you see it. but it's cleaner, it's memorable, it's kind of we have like a color kind of range as well. So like this kind of winey color here is kind of our Pelgrane color. So if you see banners or if you see our website or if you see anything like that, like that's our main kind of accent color. And again, that's all part of the kind of logo design and also your marketing and merchandising. So when we redesigned the logo, we kind of started to use it more, I guess. Like previously we would put it on books, obviously on the website and things like that. But we kind of realized that actually some of our designs, like some of our art is very cool, and some of our logos and stuff, people wanted to be able to identify themselves as fans of a particular game or whatever, or they wanted to be kind of in on the jokes and that kind of thing. So we decided to kind of set up a merchandise store, and I've already linked it in the chat, but it's pelgrane.threadless.com. And we've basically just got a kind of a small range of products up there at the moment. We're almost certainly going to be expanding it. But we've got things like stickers and t-shirts and more recently masks as well. And it just, again, it kind of comes out of a demand, like for people actually asking for these kind of items so that, again, they can wear them to cons or whatever. And it's a really, it's not something that we know very much about, and it feels kind of, it feels slightly odd for us as a company, because we're very, again, part of our brand is that we're quite kind of humble, I guess. So we don't like to blow our own kind of, toot our own horns, as it were. So it seems really weird to be like, hey, put our logo on your chest, but people want to do that, and it again, it's free advertising effectively if people are wearing t-shirts with the Pelgrane logo on it. So that wasn't very coherent or useful, but
I don't know, like
be careful of logo design.
I'm going to steal that.
You have to understand, you've already won this panel by having your cat photobomb you periodically through this.
I know, right?
Like,
it's like
there's a thing there. Like one of the best, we've only ever had one shirt, but we printed Honey Heist on it and made like the world's, as far as I'm aware, the world's first and possibly only wearable RPG. Because we can fit the whole thing on, and we even put we printed the GM section like upside down at the bottom, so only the GM can read it. And that's I think we should reprint those. I love those shirts.
That's such a brand.
But it's like that doesn't have our logo on it anywhere. That's entirely like congruent and coherent with who we are as a business, and also who we are as like who we are as people. There's a point that Cat made that I kind of want to pick up on as well, because we've talked a lot about like company branding and not a lot about product branding. So we have like Spire has a logo, Heart has a logo, Unbound even has a logo, and each of those things is like sits distinct from our company logo and needs to convey something slightly different. And usually that's if you have picked up a supplement in a store, what game set does this belong to, and how how would I use this? Does this fit with what I already have at home? And there's a whole separate conversation, I think, or a linked conversation about like the aesthetic of a game line and how that needs to flow through in a product, and how, though, if you've got multiple product lines, how those things map and connect to each other to create something which is coherent within the context of the organization. I guess that a lot of people kind of coming to this are going to be creators who are maybe not looking at multiple different product lines, but I think there's still something really critical to say there, which is that there can be a distinction between the thing you're making and the entity that is making it. And thinking about the kind of continuity of that through your core book and your supplements, or your main game and your add-ons and your expansions, or even like if you've got multiple things happening in the same world, how those things need to be distinct but also related. There's a really rich seam of design and artistry that goes into those things, and we have completely lucked out with it. and
Mhm.
mostly by just hiring really, really good artists who know what they're doing, which I'd strongly recommend as a business practice.
Mhm. I think
Bouncing
that's
off of-
a.
oh,
Oh, go ahead.
just bouncing off of that, I think that continuity concept is a great point, because continuity with your own products and with your brand, but also thinking about, and this is something I actually picked up from the romance industry. So romance writers, like RPG writers, are extremely prolific and have fan bases that are dedicated. And so one thing romance authors tend to do is they want their books not necessarily to be completely distinct, stand out, look different from all the rest. They want their books to tell their readers what kind of romance they are, because readers are very specific about what they want. So I think a lot of people, when they think of branding, they think I have to stand out and be different from everyone else and like have my own complete, look. But there is also something to be said for looking like what you're a part of, so that when readers are looking for that thing, it is easily identified. And that's about continuity and being aware of the marketplace and being aware of what's out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's super important. There's a whole like, if you look at for example, like indie RPGs versus trad RPGs, like there's a massive branding thing going on there with the form factor. Trad RPGs tend to be 8.5 by 11 hardbacks, whereas indie games tend to be like more 6 by 9, more journal size, kind of slimmer, maybe not as high production values, and that's a deliberate branding choice to make yourself consistent with the other people in your target audience.
I'm going to piggyback on that for a second, because so with Mutants and Masterminds, we do something like that, where we obviously have the Mutants and Masterminds logo, and then on all of the books it has a different like third edition, right, to identify which Mutants and Masterminds it belongs to. But the other thing is that all of the Mutants and Masterminds books are sized to emulate graphic novels from like Marvel and DC, instead of being the traditional size that you would see on like a retail shelf. And that's on purpose, right? Because Mutants and Masterminds is a superhero game, and it leans into that brand on purpose. And a lot of people don't like that it's a different size, but it sets itself apart, so that if you're looking at a store shelf, or you're looking at your shelf on your collection, and you scan your eye over it, oh, that's the superhero one, because it looks like what you would find from Marvel or DC. Maz, did I interrupt you?
No, I was literally just going to say the same thing as Cat about form factor. We made some really deliberate decisions about Spire and Heart, wanting to present them as more akin to traditional RPGs. They are very story gamey in a lot of ways, but they are definitely for a traditional RPG gamer. We wanted them displayed in stores on the same shelves, and so there's a bunch of thinking that's gone into, like, honestly, plus Chris just really likes having big hefty books because he's like 7'12", and therefore they just make him feel normal size, so that's nice. But and with the reprint of Unbound, we're deliberately going for a much smaller form factor with that, because it is although there's a lot of crunch to it, there is an explicit it has much more in common with some of the kind of world building games that have come out actually since it was first written, and we think that form factor is going to be both more usable for readers, but also just it will sit hopefully in the right place alongside games to which it is more similar. A bunch of this is about signposting to help audiences in physical retail, assuming that physical retail is still a thing beyond 2020, that there's actually a commonality there. And it's about saying we are like this thing, or this product is like these things, as much as it's about saying, Chris is enormous and likes the big books.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and I think so. The more we talk about this, the more I think I want to pivot the trust concept that we've been talking about to expectation, because that's what
that's
you're
not
talking
smart.
about is like somebody can glance at a retail shelf and they'll see Spire or they'll see Mutants and Masterminds, and those forms will communicate so many expectations to a consumer, right? So I think we're actually coming up on close to the end here when we're gonna open up the floor. Okay, yeah, so let's open up the floor to some questions. I think we have a
Yep, I'm
disembodied
here.
voice.
I am the disembodied voice. Yeah, we have a couple of questions. This one is something I think you've touched on earlier in the conversation, but perhaps we can dig a little bit deeper. So the question from Cartwheel is there a meaningful difference or a useful distinction between a personal brand and a brand for your business? Or are they just scaled versions of each other?
Thank you for the question, Cartwheel. I think Maz hit on this a lot early on in the panel, talking about the difference between Grant's brand and the company brand. So Maz, do you want to just reiterate what's going on there?
Sure. I think I'd just say that yes, they are, and they can be different. In my view, it's best if they are different for a bunch of reasons. And I don't think it's a case of simply scaling a personal brand and then that creates a business brand. There are things that people have expectations for from a business that they don't from a person, and vice versa. So as a business, like nobody is like, there are kinds of emotional response that are not appropriate for business brands, right? And there are kinds of very sort of hard, potentially quite hard-edged, hard-nosed, difficult decisions that are very difficult to do as a person, but that you might need to do or might need to express as a business. I'm thinking about things like, actually think about drive-through RPG here, and like deciding whether or not to cut ties with certain individuals on the basis of content that's been produced and published through their site. These are things that these are decisions that are really different in context if you are looking at a person versus a company. So I think for me, I would say that there's a meaningful distinction between the two. Business brands are often much less complex than personal ones. But they also, as a result, they're also much less human. And I think to JR's point about some people just want to talk to people and see people, we are in a social hobby and a social industry. So something that we recognize is that Rowan, Rook and Deckard, the brand Twitter account, is never going to have the pull or the interest of, honestly, any of the three of our personal accounts, because that's not what Twitter's about, and that's not how RPG folks react. There's a conversation to be had there. That said, Rowan, Rook and Deckard should probably be on Instagram because we do really pretty pictures, and that would probably be a valuable space for us to be in, where the three of us might want to do something completely different as individuals. So
Right.
I hope that helps to kind of elaborate.
Yeah.
I
I would definitely.
Oh, go ahead, JR.
No, that was me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think to pick up on that, and again going back to what I was saying earlier about Pelgrane being like Simon's company that did things Simon liked. The big issue with blending your personal brand and your professional brand or your company brand is that it makes it very difficult to grow, right? As a company runner, which you will be if you want to publish your own game, if you're going down the self-publishing route, you will be the CEO of your own company, right? And it can be very easy to just keep those two brands synonymous, but it makes it very difficult for you to grow that company down the line. If you're the person who's always doing the tweets, if you're the person who's always posting on Facebook, if you're the person if your face is the face of the company, it makes it very difficult for other people to come in and help you with any aspect of that company, because it's a lot, as Maz was saying, about your personal brands are considerably more complex than corporate brands, and you need your corporate brand to be broad enough that a multitude of people can represent it accurately, which is something that you can't really do with a personal brand, and it has to be distinct enough from each individual within the company as well that it's clearly it is the group. You know, when the brand speaks, it is the brand speaking. It's not, say, like Cat speaking through the Pelgrane brand. It is the Pelgrane brand speaking as a distinct entity, which a company is from the people involved. So yeah, so looking to future growth as well is a big reason to the personal and professional brands blended.
Yeah, all good stuff. Do we have another question? Disembodied voice.
We do. Let's see. Okay, so this is from Genesis of Legend, also known as Jason Pitt. How much niche protection do you think is necessary for company brands? Do you see brand confusion as a particular problem?
Nah. This industry is so small. Nah. Two people can come out with the same game mechanically that will be presented in such radically different ways. There's just not enough of us, I think, for that to be a concern.
I think I'd also say, like, games aren't interchangeable the way that, say, drills or like washing powder is. You don't need to worry that if you make a game, someone else making a game will hurt you. Like, there isn't a if people want to play Monster Hearts, they're not going to pick up GURPS and go, yeah, that'll do. So I would be less worried about niche protection and more worried about like telling the story of your game effectively. What are the kinds of stories that you tell that other game that are unique to the thing that you are putting into the world?
Yes.
So rather than seeing it as a defensive kind of posture where there's a little thing that you can protect, it's more about saying, hey, I have expanded the possibilities at your table in these ways. Isn't that exciting? Isn't that awesome? Come look at this thing I'm doing. And I think if we see, like, I personally view this as an expansive thing. Every new player that joins a game, whatever that game is an expansion of the hobby. And we are in collaboration with each other to make awesome stuff happen and to make story machines for people. We're not really in direct competition a lot of the time.
Yeah, agreed.
And at the end of the day, you know, we're all just betting on ourselves. I mean, and the one thing that we should all be good at is being ourselves. And at the end of the day, you're just saying, you know, I can be a better me than anybody else. You know, if you have something unique and worthwhile to say, if you've got real talent, you know, you will be your own niche. Even if you're doing something as routine as, well, hey, I made a high fantasy RPG. You know, if you have a unique voice and a unique talent, you will stand out even in a field that's that crowded.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Yeah, I think definitely kind of picking up on what Christopher and Maz have said. I don't think that the niche protection is specifically, you know, again, we make Cthulhu games, right? We have a lot of other people in the marketplace are making Cthulhu games. It's not, we're all, as Maz said, contributing to each other's audiences by all of our marketing efforts are effectively doubled or tripled because they are also creating other Cthulhu fans for us. You know, D&D is creating other D20 fantasy fans for our 13th Age line. You know, it's all good stuff. But the thing that I would say is with regard to, as I mentioned, 13th Age, I think that it can be, there seems to me to be an issue where people know the product. So people know Trail of Cthulhu, they know Knights of Black Agents, they know 13th Age, but not as well the company behind them. And I think that this is a big brand. I don't know whether this is something that we need to address as an industry, but so very often the product is the brand that people know. So for example, there have been multiple 13th Age Kickstarters. We, as Pelgrane Press, have not run any of them, despite the fact that we have the license for 13th Age. If anything happens with those Kickstarters, there is a direct impact on us as a company, even though we're not involved with them. So I think that niche protection around who you are and what you're doing, and making sure that people know that your brand and your company are consistently doing this thing and even though something looks like it's connected to you, it is not. Like protecting your IPs more so than protecting your niche, I think is important.
Yeah.
Excellent. So we're pretty close to needing to wrap it. So would
Okay.
everybody like to go through one more time and remind us who you are and how to reach you on social media and through other venues? And for those of you who are brands who are trying to design and sell games, how do we grab your stuff and send you money?
Okay. So my name's Will Sobel. I've been your pseudo moderator this afternoon. I work with Green Ronin Publishing. You can find me on Twitter at WordsWriteWill. And you can look for board games developed and designed by me and books coming out by me soon. And let's just go back in the same order that we did at the beginning. Kat, do you want to tell us?
Yep. So I'm Cat Tobin. You can find me personally on Twitter. I'm at Cat THM, and then you can find Pelgrane Press. Basically, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitch, we're on YouTube, we're on all the things as Pelgrane Press. So if you just search for Pelgrane, you'll find us. We pretty much have the market cornered on the word Pelgrane.
Christopher?
Well, I'm still Professor Christopher McGlothlin. I'm still skating by on my fashion sense, and you can find us on Facebook. Just look for Ghost Show Press on Facebook. Look for the fabulous Ghost Show logo, and a great time to be jumping aboard the Ghost Show. We're going to be launching our next Kickstarter in January, and we're hoping in the next week or two to make a very, very exciting announcement about what that is and the amazing people we're going to be working with there.
Awesome.
So I'm J.R. Blackwell. I'm pretty much J.R. Blackwell everywhere on social media. And I'm a part of D&D Dads, which is an advice show about role-playing games. If you have a question that we didn't answer today, or if you have a question about role-playing games, you can write to askyourdads, plural dads, there are two of us, at gmail.com. And we're just preparing for season 2. So now's a great time to get those questions in.
And I'm Maz. You can find my personal brand at Newsmary on Twitter and pretty much everywhere else that social media is a thing. You can find Rowan Rook and Deckard at rowanrookanddeckard.com, or if you can't spell that, rrdgames.com will take you there. We are on Twitter, we are on Facebook, we are most active on Discord. There's a really kind of active and friendly Discord community that we are, all three of us are very active in as well. Come drop by, say hi, ask questions. And if you are a creator who is looking to produce something, who would like a bit of advice or a bit of consultation, I am offering some mentoring sessions between now and the new year. So drop me a DM or send us an email through the contact form if that's something that interests you.
Excellent. Thank you all for showing up at various time zones, wherever you are, afternoon or evening. And thank everybody for showing up to listen to what we have to say about growing your brand. We hope to see you around.
Thanks.